So last week I sat down with my friend Carl Weische, who is the German mastermind behind the Accelerated Agency. They work with Alex Hormozy, the Udi, Huel, AG1, Kinobody. They basically work with everybody. If you're a brand doing over $10 million a year, $100 million a year, you work with Carl. Carl's a good friend of mine. We had a very interesting, in-depth conversation about psychology and business and what it looks like when you go into the seven-figure and then the eight-figure range. And I hope you guys enjoy the video. He's a good friend of mine. He's very intelligent, and I hope you guys learn a lot. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.
Carl Weische, was geht ab?
What's happening, bro? Super excited for this one.
So, for the people who don't know you, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. So, I've known you for a little bit of time now. I think almost a little over a year. And you are the godfather of CRO, conversion rate optimization. You run a very successful agency. You're a very successful guy, also a very nice guy. And in terms of everything that you've done, I think out of everyone in the space, you are the best. So my first question to you is, how's that feel?
Appreciate the warm introduction, first of all. I feel humbled. I don't really have a feeling associated with it. It's funny because I had this conversation the other day with my co-founder where I was like, hey, we pushed the needle so far and we did so much stuff and we were always able to like reverse engineer bigger people, bigger business owners and bigger agencies. And now we're at like the forefront of like our niche and kind of like the business model that we are running with like the CRO stuff.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed, and it's really interesting to like not being in like the windshield, like the behind somebody that you can just like follow and like step by step execute what they do. It's like it kind of changed to the point where you have to come up with new stuff, where you have to find ways of like scaling further, of like how to manage a team, how to add more channels to your funnel and all of that stuff to be able to grow it even further. And it's always weird for me, right? It's like it's a change now that I'm seeing like in my paradigm and like the way that I view it, just because I get so many people coming to me and say like, hey, I'm just copy and pasting what you do, and I'm like, fuck, I need somebody that I can reverse engineer, right? Like I have to go into other fields, like I have to reverse engineer Alex Becker, how he's scaling his SaaS, right?
Yeah.
How he does ads, VSL, funnels, and all that stuff, and somewhat have to apply to mine. But it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the reasons, I think I said this to you, especially when we first started talking or first started becoming friends, like I think you and I have a very similar mindset when it comes to business, where it's the entire ecosystem of business is thinking about things systematically. And how do we reverse engineer what's working? How do we make it ours? How do we iterate on it? How do we improve on it? And then also, how can we use fundamental human psychology in order to really push the envelope of everything that we're trying to achieve? Where'd you learn that stuff?
I was about to say, like, I almost feel like you're German, the way that you think about business and the way that you act, because it's
I am
for me, it's
half German, bro.
yeah. For me, it's like I feel like it's almost in my DNA. It's like it's the way that the German culture is. It's like really efficient, really like strict, and really like thinking about rules and systems. And I would say for me in the beginning, I was like really all over the place and just like super motivated to get like shit done, and I had like a really good output. And at some point in the journey, I was more like I had to learn that stuff in terms of like system thinking, in terms of building processes and being able to like reverse engineer stuff from other fields and like building it into my business. I think it was one of the key things that I learned along the way, and it's like super important, right? Because otherwise, you like if you don't have systems, if you cannot think systematically or like build processes and like also test and iterate, then yeah, you will have a really hard time in business.
Yeah.
Let's just put it like that. But I feel it was a bit of like the German DNA coupled with like having to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, specifically, I've been really, it's funny because a lot of people will say they're marketers, right? Or they're running a marketing agency. But most people I find they actually don't know marketing. And I was watching, especially when I was when I hit you up when I had that brand that I was doing in Dubai, and I was watching actually, I think one of your mastermind events that you put on, and just the psychology. I think it was it? I think it might have been Aryan. How do I say his name? Aryan, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was. I think he was talking about something with like Google reviews or something, in the psychology of like the Google reviews or the way the ads are structured and everything like
Yeah.
that. And you kind of learn, like, because I'm not an e-commerce guy, right? I've been basically a sales guy, and I've done quite a lot of things in the agency space. I haven't messed around with e-commerce and things like that too much. But I think that what was interesting about the processes is just breaking down everything to the fundamentals and then building them back up from there. And I think, you have so much information around that it is not only beautiful to see, but it is like you can look at what is working in so many different areas, and then you can just apply the same methodologies to whatever business that you're in. Right. So for you doing like CRO and like doing advertising and stuff, I realized that you can use the same principles for e-commerce advertising in other other types of advertising, because it's all based on the fundamentals of psychology. So let's see. What is my question here? My question here is, how did you learn that, and how did you figure that out?
Interesting one. First of all, I really resonate with like your point of view in regards to that. I feel like the fundamentals in business are oftentimes super similar, right? Like I mean, you've sold millions of dollars over the phone or like door to door and like sales calls or like some form of like sales interaction, right, with like people. And you will know that also sometimes obviously you have to like fine tune the script, or it's about like stuff like the tonality or like those small things, but that's more of like the 80% of effort that will get you the 20% of output. In the beginning, like the big needle mover is always understanding like how people work, right? Like the psychology aspect of it. And I think like once you've like kind of digested that and really understood, like, okay, this is the psychology of how people buy something, this is how the psychology of how people consume stuff, and this is the psychology or like what's happening from the psychological perspective, like in their brain or like emotionally of how they buy something, then you can apply that to sales calls, then you can apply that to copywriting, to landing pages, conversion optimization, whatever it is, right? And that's why I think like you and I resonate so much too, because like we like from the fundamentals and like the psychology perspective, like we are super like on the same point. We just apply it to like different areas and like different businesses, right? But that's why I like 80%, 90% on the time of the time on my channels and mastermind presentation, I always say foundations, psychology, consumer psychology, like understand how to sell stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I also feel like people like you have a unfair advantage in comparison to people that never sold anything and then start with marketing, because you understand what it looks like and what it feels like to sell something to someone one-on-one, right? And get their immediate feedback. And I think a lot of like guys nowadays, they just start with like online marketing, and then they like sit in front of their computer and they try to write sales copy, and they try to follow a blueprint or framework, and like they don't really understand what's going on. You know what I mean? So to circle to the question in terms of like how to learn that, or like how I learned it specifically, for me, I was starting to get obsessed with psychology even before I know what business was, right? When I was 15, 16 years old, I had like a really tough time in like school because I didn't like really fit in. I was more of like an outlier, and I didn't really understand like how I'm working and how other people are thinking and working. And I just couldn't fit in really, right? And I like over one summer I picked up a lot of books from the public library around like communication, motivation, emotions, all of that stuff, right? Relationships. Just because for some weird reason I like didn't understand any of it, right? I didn't connect with anyone, I didn't resonate with anyone, and I was like, what the fuck? Like it's obvious in puberty, but like I was just like, what the fuck? I want to understand this shit. How do I work? How do other people work? And that's why I got so obsessed with like understanding every single aspect there is around psychology. But first of all, for like the personal development reasons, right? Like how can I influence myself? How can I influence relationships that I have with other people? And then just over the years, I slowly got into consumer psychology, sales psychology, and all of that stuff, and like started applying it to business. But it really started with me personally getting so obsessed with it.
Yeah. You know, I kind of did the same thing, right? So I had a Spanish class when I was in high school. I don't know what they call it in Germany, but I had a Spanish class and I failed. I was like failing Spanish. And so they transferred me into psychology class and I started learning all of this stuff. And it's kind of just, it ends up being a natural transition. At first, I wanted to figure out how do I use psychology to like get girls, right? Like most guys.
Yeah.
Like, how do I just stop being in like such a shitty position in life or like motivate myself out of it? And then you end up like getting into business and then you realize, okay, sales, psychology, this is kind of like business is people and relationships, and you can use the things that you know about human nature and psychology, and then there's consumer psychology, and then how do you get people to buy stuff, and color psychology, and all these different niches and aspects of it. And I think, you know, it's a very natural transition. And so, you know, obviously, you know, you and I, it's something I know about you is we both like nice things, right? We both have nice cars, we both have nice watches, things like that. So for me, like when I first got into all of the sales stuff, when I was like, okay, well, as I'm going to try to get into marketing and start a marketing agency, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do, I started with email, right? Like, and I don't do email anymore, but and I just write my own stuff now. But I was like, well, I'm just going to sell expensive stuff because I like buying expensive stuff. So who better to sell the product than someone who knows how customers like to be sold to? And I think you can learn a lot from that and really pick up a lot of information. But also something that I do want to say, and I think which is a very important point, is that that a lot of people, they don't differentiate marketing from advertising and even psychology from marketing. Like brand and marketing are very important. But when you get into the weeds with CRO and the things that you do and how you guys do it, like the secret sauce behind what it is that you guys do, most of it is actually data. And a lot of people don't realize that advertising and CRO and optimization and business as a whole is based on two things. It's psychology and data. And so if you can create a system where, okay, you can, so the marketing where you funnel people in, the marketing and the brand and everything like that, when you actually get into the business backend, you have to be very data driven and you have to be very technical, because if you can't track anything, you can't measure it. And what I feel like a lot of beginners specifically fail to understand is that in order to run a marketing agency, you have to learn marketing and be good at marketing, but you also have to understand the numbers of the business. A lot of people get into this. They want to do, oh, I want to make 10K a month online. Where you and I are at, we kind of realize, okay, that's not even a question. We can't even, that's a really bad month. So how much of the, like, what was the transition process like when you started Accelerated, or when you really started working with the big clients that you have? How much of that was, okay, I'm going to start on the psychology end, and then what did the transition look like between kind of the just getting started, the 30 to 50K a month range, and then really getting into the weeds with how data driven you have to be in order to make your clients successful? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, a lot. I would kind of differentiate into two different parts, like me running the agency and then also like how we do it for clients.
Yeah.
For the clients, it's funny enough, like we always work with data. Like the basically like the first thing we always did in the onboarding was look at data, right? And data is like, it's often thrown around as a buzzword, but it's basically just like getting into the weeds or like talking to customers, reading testimonials, reading reviews, going into forums, reading comments under YouTube videos. Sometimes get on phone with customers and just ask them a bunch of stuff, right? And those are all like really valuable data points, right? So that's like one big chunk of data that we always like to look at, just because I don't want to like come up with what the customer's problems are. I just want to ask them, or I just want them to give me the answer, because they will give me a better answer that I could come up with, right? And they will have certain words and certain slang and certain pain points that I couldn't even think of, and that's super valuable. And then the second thing, and especially for everything like website stuff, there's so much crazy stuff you can track, right? Like if you go on Amazon and you're shopping on there for 10 minutes and you buy a product, then Amazon will have a 10-minute screen recording of everything that you did. And people don't really notice, but like all of the big brands do this. Like think of it as like sharing your screen in Zoom meeting, And like I get to see everything that you're doing online. Like with all of the big brands, we install softwares like this so we can understand like how people are interacting with the page, where they click, what they read, what they scroll, what pages they visit, all of that crazy stuff, right? And it's so much interesting and valuable data. And then you can also, based on all of that, like how they interact with the page and the psychology aspect of it, come up with ideas on how to iterate, on how to fine-tune the customer journey, on how to make a better offer. Because let's say they always scroll past the product description, right? Maybe it's boring, maybe the sales copy isn't written that great. Then you have a first idea to look at that section specifically. And then maybe from the customer reviews, you will find certain pain points. And then an idea could be like, okay, maybe we should optimize the product description, write better sales copy, and utilize all of the pain points that we found in the reviews, right? And that's basically like the process that you just go through over and over again to come up with all of these ideas on how to like make a better website, or like on how to do CRO for the website.
I see. So it's really the point that I get from that, which I think is very important, is so you guys are looking for not only what the customer does, but what they don't do. And so testing on both sides. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's
so
similar
that's
to, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say like that's basically for the customers. I would say for my business, and I'm interested in hearing like your opinion in terms of like when you started obsessing with data. I think there were like different stages, like in terms of like the business with like different KPIs that we started to look at, right? I would say the first thing we did at around like 50 to 100K a month range was to really look at like cash flow and profit, and also like how many customers like each team member could handle, and those like bigger KPIs. And I felt like the bigger we grew, the more KPIs we added into the business. Like how much task does a employee do? What is the NPS score of a customer? What is the retention rate? How long do they stay on? What's customer lifetime value? Now that I'm like running ads and all of that stuff, there's like so much more data points, like what's the ad spend, what do I pay per like demo, what do I pay per customer, and all of that stuff. And I think like the bigger you grow, the more KPIs you kind of add into the business. And that's it's in German we have the saying like, don't work in the business, work on the business. I don't think if there's a similar
Yeah,
saying.
absolutely.
Yeah. But that just clicked really with me over like the past 12 months. I was like, fuck, I cannot work in the business anymore. I cannot do operational work anymore. Like everything I should do is look at KPIs and also treat my business like a funnel, right? Like this is the KPI to get customer. This is the KPI when we have a customer, like how long we have them. And these are the team KPIs, and just look like what KPIs are not where they should be, and then figure out how to optimize that. And it's this really interesting thing that I'm learning right now, to have this like bird's eye view on the business and treat it as like a customer's business almost, right? Like what's the KPI that's not on track that we have to fix?
I am about to tell you something that you probably already know, but the way that I'm going to say it is going to make so much sense. So really quickly, when I first started obsessing kind of, and it, regardless of how homosexual it sounds, when I first started obsessing about data was when I was 22 years old. And it was to improve my sales process, because I was in a position where like so when you're in a corporate role or a sales job or some sort of job where you're paid based on how you perform, there's a lot of stress, a lot of external pressures. You have your life situation going on. You have your internal situation. You have your internal state, your external state, what you're saying to customers on the phone, how you're closing deals and everything like that. And I remember looking at my process, and I remember I had a 68% close rate. And it was the highest out of anyone on the team, out of about 45 people. The company in the department had about 200 people. And my team was about 45, like total, my channel, what it was called, was about 45 people. And I had the highest close rate out of everyone, but I noticed I was still middle of the pack. So I asked my mentor, and I said, hey, or my sales manager, who was also my mentor, and I said, hey, like, why do I have the highest close rate on the floor out of everyone, but I'm not number one? And he goes, well, we have to look at the data. And so he taught me within the span of 15 minutes how to look at all of the KPIs. He said, okay, here's what we're going to look at. So you have high outbound calls, but you have low opportunities opened, high close rate. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me you're saying the wrong thing on the front end of the call. He said, if you open a deal, you close the deal, right? We're not worried about you being a good closer. We're worried about what you're saying on the front of the, if you change up what you're saying on the front end of the phone call or of the sales process, and you get that opportunity open, well, what's going to happen? And I said, I'm going to close more deals. And he says, exactly. And he said, so let's see let's now qualitatively and empirically, what's working here for someone else who is number one. And that was another guy that I learned a lot from. But we pulled up this call. I listened to the call. I said, holy fuck, that pitch sounds so much different. I literally wrote it down, hand wrote it on my notepad, wrote it, typed it up on my computer. The next guy I called, one call closed, $100,000 financing deal on the phone, like magic. I then used that pitch the entire week, and I was literally like just teleported. My ranking on the board teleported. So the data, what a lot of people don't realize is that the data gives you everything that you need to know in order to adjust your process with emails or outbound, right? In terms of if you do cold email, if you do whatever, right? Or if you're sending e-commerce emails. If people aren't opening the email, there's a problem with the subject line. If they're not clicking, there's a problem with the offer, a problem with the content. And if they're clicking, but it's not translating to sales, then there's an issue on the back end of the business where it might be a pricing issue. It might be a product description. That's where you come in, right? So then how do we iterate on the process where the actual customer journey is messed up? So as far as, the business is concerned, like that's where I learned all this stuff. And then when I started back in the day with the cash flow syndicate stuff, is like, I really started obsessing about the data because I needed to figure out, like, it was to the point where a 2% reduction in customer churn was worth like 10 grand. Right. So you have to figure out mental models and processes. Like, how do we increase LTV? How do we not only acquire more customers, but if we can decrease churn 2.5%, 5%, how do we just get them to stay 1 month longer? It's like a lot of money. And once you start to kind of get past the guppy in the pond, the little fish in the pond, the 10, 15, 20K a month mark, you then have to really dial in on the data, because those data-driven decisions that you make based on the quantitative and the qualitative data in the business, what's going to happen is you have to figure out, okay, how much is this worth to me? And there's sales systems and there's strategies, and you can manage the health of the business from the data, but also from a KPI level. When you work on the business, you have two different levels where you can look at individual and you can look at the team. You have two, obviously they live on two sides, right? You have acquisition and you have service delivery. Service delivery is things like, how long is it taking us to get a funnel up? How long is it taking to write the copy? How long is it taking to get the ad creative completed, or whatever it may be within the business, right? You want those numbers to be as low as possible. On the sales side, you want the numbers to be as high as possible. Because if someone has, and all of the different metrics, like I was in my sales job, are going to tell you exactly where that sales rep needs to improve, benchmark it against somewhere between absolutely fucking impossible and kind of realistic, put it somewhere in the middle there where it's you really have to shoot for the stars, and then dial in the processes from there on an individual level, and then the team level, aggregate and average all of the metrics from the team based on the individuals, divide it, and then track that against a health score. And then you get the average health of the team, so you can see where you need to train the team and where you need to train the individual. And you can run the business like literally on a napkin. Right? I can see outbound and everything like that. So
yeah, it's crazy. It's and that's what I think, like, a lot of people don't like really get into, or like that's like what they don't like check or like want to learn, just because it's so complex, right? If you haven't done it, if you don't know what it's about. But I think it's like really, as soon as I would say, like, you're probably crossing around like 150K a month, like that's like the biggest thing. Just like everything that you've just mentioned in terms of like optimizing data, optimizing KPIs, and also understanding like how certain KPIs affect like other KPIs, right? Yeah. And it's funny because I was always on like the marketing and sales side for our business. And at some point, I was like, okay, if I can now decrease customer acquisition costs, or I can increase ad spend, or some of that stuff to like get more clients in the door to like reach our goals, or I can just like maybe optimize a bit the fulfillment structure, the retention and upsell, a cross sell or something like that. And it's way easier and it's way more profitable to just extend a client, like work on that upsell call instead of like pushing more clients into the front end. And that's like, I feel like it really helps you with the decision making if you understand the different data points across the business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about just tracking everything as much as possible and understanding the business from like a health point of view, right? Because you have different levers that you can pull on the business. And honestly, Carl, I think you're running out of people to work with. Bro, you have everybody already. Like you have that. There's no one else.
Yeah.
On the off chance that there is. But you know, you have to understand it's like once you get to that point in the business, and one thing I will say is it might not even happen at the 100 to 150K a month mark. It happens when your complexity level of employees or people that you need in the business, like in terms of service delivery or in terms of acquisition or sales, as that starts to increase, because by every employee, the complexity of the business increases by one order of magnitude because it's one more person to manage, one more person to keep track of. It is a little bit more difficult, but if you have those metrics and you start, it's one of those things, if you start it early and you're able to track everything, you're able to grow faster. And so at the end of the day, you have to then look at the business and say, okay, well, what are the most profitable decisions that we can make based on the time investment? Because eventually you get, like Oscar is having this problem right now where he has to decline people to work with. And his level of scale is just so much because it's just simply not profitable for him.
Mm.
If he's doing $80,000, $100,000 a month, it's like a 3K deal is not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
You know? So talk to me about, like, because you work with everybody, and I'll say this, like for those who don't know you, like I said, you are the godfather of the game right now. And actually, before we get into that, I will say this. You know, you are a great person to reverse engineer, and I say that as someone who has reverse engineered some of your stuff. So the standard growth model idea that you had, phenomenal. Phenomenal. And you're a great person to look to in terms of systems and operations. And I think the way that you put everything when it comes to just business as a whole, like you're in a position now, obviously, where you're very successful, you do very well. But as far as like business operations and things like that are concerned, like I've even taken stuff like the idea of having a white paper or a thesis and something that just simply shows how competent you are at what you do is a beautiful way to have some sort of asset for, you know, as an olive branch to extend to people for future business. Yeah. Because it's a great way to separate. It's a phenomenal way to separate yourself from everyone else. And understanding the frameworks and understanding the methodologies that go into that are very important, especially I think for young beginners or people who are kind of just getting started or people at the 20K a month mark. Because my favorite thing is when people say, oh, I'm at 20K a month, I'm crushing it. And it's like, haha.
You don't even know, bro.
You don't even know yet, bro. So talk to me about where that idea came from. The idea of a thesis, right? It's because once you're, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but it comes from the aspect of not only the competition that exists in the marketplace with everyone else trying to do similar things, but as a way to stand out and show the competitive advantage and the unfair advantage that they have working with you, because they can see if you're doing conversion rate optimization to make them more money and be data driven and be systematic and test things, they can see the process of how you think along with being put through a sales process before they're even put through the sales process. Am I on the right track there?
You nailed it. I don't even have to explain anything anymore. Really transparent. Like I have it from a really good friend in Germany who's like super smart savvy marketer, and he has it from Nick Hausman. I don't know if Nick Horstman has it from like anyone else, but I believe Nick Horstman was the first one to kind of take this into the online marketing thing, to have like a Google Docs that's like easily shareable and accessible, and just have like a 40 to 60 page breakdown of like every single nitty gritty step that you do in the process. And you nailed it already. It's just, and we had this conversation like some time ago on Instagram or Twitter, I think, that it's easy to steal copy. It's easy to steal a design or like website or tweets or something like that. But it's like the highest barrier of entry to record a 1 hour long video walkthrough of a 40-page document.
Yeah.
Because you cannot fake that, right? Like people, and that ties back into psychology, people will subconsciously feel from your tonality and your certainty, if you're the expert and if this is your stuff or if you've just ripped it, right? And that's the beauty of a thesis, and that's the beauty of long form video content, that it's the biggest differentiator, because all of the beginners, all of the novices, like they cannot copy it, they cannot reverse engineer it, they cannot steal it, right? Like if anyone was to copy this thesis as a CRO freelancer, like please go ahead, you're going to be ripped apart from somebody who watches it, because they're going to be like he himself, he doesn't even know, like it's like university lecture, like nobody understands like what's written there, right? And it's yeah, but that's the concept of the thesis. Like you want to get the point across that you are the expert, you understand exactly what you're talking about. And it's also ties a bit into the Alex Hormozy model of like, you can give out all of the information. Like I tell this people all the time, go to my YouTube channel if you want to learn CRO, go to other YouTube channels if you want to do other stuff. Like everything's out there, you can do it yourself. But, and that's like the value proposition, or that's like how to sell them, it's like, but there will be a long trial and error period. And for the my ideal customer profile, it's going to be way more profitable to just pay me rather than waste their resources and time and energy to like try to get it work with the resources that's online.
100%. 100%. Because you're not taking on anybody who's doing less than what, 10 million a year?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I think it's we just kind of progressed to that. Like in the beginning, it was like everybody, and then was people making 100K a month, 200, 300, 500, and we just progressed and like pushed the bar higher and higher and higher. There are two really simple reasons to that. One being with conversion rate optimization, you always work with the volume that's on the store. It's not like media buying or something where we can just scale. Like we are always like, the results we can get a client are always tied to the revenue that they're already making, because we get a percentage increase. We are always going to get them like a 10-20% increase. If it's a $1 million per year business, it's going to be like 100-200K per year. Nice. Okay. Yeah. That doesn't even pay our service fee. You know what I mean? If it's a $10 million business, the worst case is that we're going to make them $1 million a year. If it's a $100 million business, and yada, yada, yada. So that's like number one. And then the number two, and you will have experienced this, everyone that's been in the space for long has experienced this. The bigger they become, the higher tickets you can charge, the easier the work will be, and the easier the relationship, and everything is easier the higher you go in terms of clientele and the more you charge. It's basically like you reduce your operational headache from like weeding out all of the low level tier clients and just going for like the super, super high end.
Yeah. Do you think there's anyone who's competing with you?
I would say there are a lot of people in the like same niche. It's funny because I've seen a trend over like the past 2 years of people kind of specializing in like A/B testing, or like going into the direction that we're going into, and like the thousands of freelancers appearing on Twitter now. I wouldn't really say competing, just because like we have always been so cautious around like our personal brand and our positioning and like the brands we work with, and like our standing in the market, and the way that I view like everyone else that has some form of a similar service is like they have such a different perception, they have such a different personal brand. So it's like sometimes like prospects will be in multiple sales calls and then go with us or go with others. But it's more of like I would say individual preference, right? Because like you've seen like how we appear, it's like a bit more like the ballsy, more like maybe a bit Alex Becker, like a bit cocky, and it's not like the nerd data IT personal brand.
Yeah,
And that resonates with certain people and it doesn't with others.
you know, that's interesting because my stuff is very similar, right? It's you know, people either love it. Anyone who's ever been great has been polarizing to a certain degree, but also you, I can see like if you're hiring computer engineers, like you want them to be nerds, but you also need people that understand, like, that really just understand the game. Because I think you're how old are you again? You're 20.
25.
Yeah, you're 25 now. So I'm 2 years older than you. But you know, it's really just a testament to what you've done, where you've come into this industry and within the past few years just absolutely dominated. And I think it's because you appear that way. Because at some point, when you get big enough and you are the business, right? Even though you have however many employees that you have now, where you are the business, if you're still the founder, if you're still the face, then, you know, you have to, like, people are either going to love you and they, or they're going to hate you. But I think it ends up becoming a competitive advantage because of just who you become in personal brand and things like that.
Yeah.
You know?
And what I will say to this is like 2.5 years ago, I like did a complete analysis of like everyone in the market, and it was so funny because they were all the same. Like nobody stood out. They were all this, and it's not like a mean or something, but it's like they were all these personal brands of like data nerds, like sitting behind the computer, like they all have glasses, they all that stuff, right? And then I was like, okay, I have to be the complete opposite with my personal brand, right? I have to be aspirational. I have to like people have to like love it or hate it, right? But it's like and that's what like you're completely right? Like you have to have some form of like polarizing aspect to it. And that's I feel like also why we have had a certain degree of success, because we have a almost like a tribe community of like people that look up to us, right? Like they like you a lot. They follow you, they engage with your content, they spread positive word of mouth. And I would even go as far as saying like these other guys in the market that have more of like a, they don't want to be edgy, they don't want to kick anybody off, they don't want to say stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they are just wishy-washy. You know what I mean? It's like people are not going to be so like looking up to them, like so aspirated that they are just going to follow them. Like they will not have a community or tribe. And I think that's a yeah, it's a really interesting differentiator.
Yeah, it definitely is, because like the way that I see it nowadays is there's so many people competing in the marketplace, right? There's so many people competing. It's really hyper competitive now, especially in my game and my space, right? Even with like the consulting stuff, like the consulting that we still do for clients and like some of the other things that I'm working on. But it's more now about the fact that winners want to work with winners. And long gone are the days where you can just send out some emails and, you know, get to 20K a month. Long gone are the days where you can make the same guaranteed offer of the, or you don't pay, or we'll guarantee this, we'll guarantee that. It just comes off now as unprofessional. And I think that not only do you have to come off with the highest, especially when you're doing business and operating at the level specifically, you know, that you're operating at now with the clients that you have, but you have to come off as professional as possible. You have to be as professional as possible, and you have to really know your stuff. And your job as a business owner is, as people who actually, if people actually want to run a business, your job is to represent your business in the best possible way and show that you are the most competent person to do the job. Nowadays, like we have the network now where it's like any kind of problem that we ever have with anything, we kind of just know somebody who can get it done. But these other guys, like, who are just trying to go out into the marketplace and go get business, and I'll guarantee you a 30% increase with this. It's just, it's not realistic. And so what tips do you have for those who are just starting out to develop competency and win in the marketplace today?
I have an amazing tip, and I just heard this the other day. I think somebody reminded me of a great sentence from Sam Ovens, which is, your business is a reflection of your character. And what you just said, like, really resonated with me. Like, winners want to work with winners, and people feel if you're in tune with yourself, and people feel if you're certain, and people feel if you believe in yourself, right? And for me, I was always a believer of, I have to work on my character, and that will allow me to reach the next stage in business growth, right? Like, I have to get a certain skill set. I have to get certain beliefs. I have to have certain paradigms. I have to have certain worldviews, certain communication skills. I have to like learn so much stuff and develop my character, and then that will reflect in my business. And I think that's the number one tip I can give to anybody listening, and that's like more on the beginner or like starting out. It's like, really work on yourself. Like, sit down, try to look at the people that you want to become like, and not look at just like the business or like what they're doing, but like how they're doing it, like, and like who they are. And for me, like, people like Alex Becker have always been a super big inspiration, because if you don't look if you don't watch the Twitter videos or like the crypto videos, but rather like the videos 3, 4, 5 years ago, where he sits down and he explains like, I'm living in an empty penthouse, I don't have anything, I have my diet down to the T, this is when I wake up, this is how I work, this is where I sleep, everything's optimized, right? It's really like that. And for me, the my business has been flourishing the most, and is continues to flourish the most when I obsess with like becoming a better person in like every single area. It's like your fitness is dialed in, your diet is dialed in, your sleep is dialed in, your relationships with family, with friends, with maybe your partner, your relationship with yourself, your emotional states. All, like, I could open up this like box of Pandora, right? You notice there's like 100 things to like personal development, but you got to start, right? It takes a fucking long time, and I think people don't realize this. Like, success doesn't happen overnight. It always looks like it happens overnight, but it's for most it's like a decade, right? Or like 2 decades of like hard, continuous work, and then at some point it like starts going off.
You know, I was just watching two of the Becker videos last night, and he talked about getting rid of all of the dumb shit, right? And so, like, you have a very nice Porsche. You have a Panamera, yeah?
Taycan.
Icon, okay. And you also have a 59, what is that, 5912?
5726 with a moon face.
Yeah, 5726 moon phase. For anybody listening to this video, I want you to go to chrono24.com and type that in. So, Becker was talking about, and I have a question here coming up, but Becker was talking about like getting rid of everything and just obsessing about your business, because when you do that, you can build the biggest thing possible. And I'm even in a state where now all I do is work on the business, and I'm working and trying to make things as successful as I possibly can. And I don't really even have the time to enjoy all the dumb shit that I bought. And then all their cars, there's always a problem with the service. Like, I had to pay $3,000 for service for the Aston Martin. And now I got the Lamborghini back from the service center the other day. And now the lifting system has a failure because there's a software update. So now I have to take 2 hours out of my day, go down there, have them fix it. It's just headaches, right? And so I started buying the dumb shit right after I cracked my first, like, the business itself had its first 100K month. When did you, because you recently just started buying the dumb shit too. When did you start doing it, and why? Because mine was like, I always wanted this shit to, like, I was just like, oh, I want to be the man. I want to drive a Lambo. I want to drive this car. I want to have this watch. I want to be able to have these vacations and things like that. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel now that it just obviously becomes your life. And all of the things that I buy now, I have revenue goals and milestone goals attached to them. So talk to me about when you started, because you started last year, I think.
Yeah, a really great question. So for me, it was a really, like, first it was like a really calculated move of like I wasn't really like a car guy or like a watch guy or something. Like, I had everything, like all of my friends had stuff. Like, every single friend I have has a fucking Porsche or two Porsche. Right? Like, every fucking friend I have has at least like a nice Rolex. Most of them have APs or like a Patek or two. And it's I was always surrounded by it, but I never had like the huge ambition to just get it now, right? I was like, okay, one day I will get it. But then I had this incident where like a good friend Arian that you spoke about earlier, he picked me up in Munich from my hotel at like 8 p.m. in the evening with his Porsche, right? And I went down to the lobby, I went outside, and he just stood in front of the car in front of his like blacked out Porsche. And I was like, fuck, bro, he looks like fucking James Bond. And I literally after that went home to my Porsche dealer and like ordered a Porsche because I was like, the perception that I had, like the perceived status was insane. Same with the watch. And that's why I was just like, okay, I have to get it. Like the perception of people who have it is crazy. And it's so dumb and it's so coming back to psychology, right? Like I'm no different if I have this watch on or not. But
Yeah.
people perceive me different. I'm not different if I drive like a Porsche or I don't know, like an Audi. But people perceive you different. And like the perception matters and the perception is worth so much. And I just saw that it's going to have like a huge impact on the business. So that's why I did it. It was like really calculated. But then when I bought it, I started to enjoying it like crazy. And it was always also really interesting to see how it's impacting your character again,
Yeah.
right? It's weird. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe you can find the words to describe it, but it's doing something to you to drive in a nice car and everybody looks at you. It's
Yeah.
doing something with your character if everyone looks at your wrist because you have a nice watch. It really does something to you.
Nietzsche spoke about this, and he spoke about it. It's called positive feedback loops or life affirming systems. And the only issue with what you just described is if you let the scale tip too far on one side.
I think my cam just went off.
You're good. So,
Yeah,
oh,
I just turned it off and on again.
hold on. It says no signal.
Yeah, probably overheated.
Hmm.
Just give me a sec. Oh yeah,
Oh,
we're
there we
back.
go. So the only issue is when that scale tips too far to one side. Either you feel too much like shit and you need this stuff, or you feel too good and you start to really get into your own ego, and it starts to ruin a lot of the things that you once had or once loved or something like that, right? I noticed myself when I started, especially making money before I even had any of the dumb shit, 'cause I'm a lot more humble now than I was. Specifically, like you can scroll, like people can scroll back on my Twitter and just see how much of an asshole I was. But I now it's kind of like it's just my stuff now. And I ride around and I said, well, why are these people looking at me? And then I realize I'm in a $250,000 car.
But it's
And
interesting what you just described. It's like it changed. Like I feel like you have these like different phases where you like your ego inflates like crazy. You start making money, you buy all of this nice stuff, and you have like a certain time period where you're just like an asshole and like super like
yeah,
ego driven. And then at some point you like realize what you're doing, and then you just humble yourself, and you're like the most successful and you're making the most amount of money, but you're also like humble like you were before. And that's what I think like really that's really beautiful.
it is, but it sucks sometimes because it ruins a lot of relationships. Specifically for me, man, I've been like, you know, just because I can go either way sometimes. It's like sometimes if I'm too into it, especially when you're riding that high, right? The first high of being successful and making money is always it always feels the best, right? Until you need to rebuild, until you have a contraction, and then you have another quantum leap forward, you do not realize how you have to practice as much humility as possible. Because the bigger you are, the harder you fall. I completely believe that. And getting into a lot of people get this from the content that they consume, right? They'll consume a lot of lifestyle content, very ego driven content. And it sells stuff. It really does. It's very good for selling stuff, but you always have to have a separation between the ego and who you actually are and the id, right? And so if you put your ego and your super ego into overdrive, you're going to feel really good and then you'll crash. And it happens to everyone. It happened to me. It's probably, maybe happened to you where, you ride this wave and this high of success, and then either God or the universe punches you back in the face or kicks your fucking teeth in, and you realize, oh shit, I gotta make something happen again, or I have to, this is not everything. Like I'm losing people, or I'm losing things, or I'm not doing the things that were making me successful in the first place, which is what I realized. And you then now recorrect, right? It's like aiming a bow and arrow, shooting, and then now correcting your aim, right? After you hit 10 bullseyes in a row, and then you start missing. And now it's, for me, it's like I kind of just realized that, like, okay, like this is my life, and I'd be completely okay without it, even though, and I do say I'd be completely okay without it, but like I had the Lambo in the service center for 2 weeks, and I was starting to kind of get annoyed because I couldn't drive. So, and then I realized I started bitching about it, and like the ego was coming out and everything again.
Yeah.
So you have to really find the healthy balance. And like there's probably going to be people that watch this or listen to this and they're like, if I had, millions of dollars, or I was making 100K a month and I had a supercar, I'd be the man and I'd get all these girls and whatever. But you realize, like, once you actually become successful, is like the people who are at the top of the game, like, we don't, I'll post my car and shit on Twitter, but we don't need to use that shit for lifestyle marketing, or we don't need to, like, it's just kind of our lives where the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the things that have been achieved, but it's not overt, right? The flexing or the things that are being propagated or perpetuated into the marketplace or onto the internet or used as a means of client acquisition are not overt. And so eventually everyone comes back down to reality. And then you can then either choose if you want to victimize yourself if you do get kicked in the face, or if you want to use it as a way to have a quantum leap forward. So
Yeah. I think that's also the beauty of the journey, right? And that's like everyone that's starting out and listening to this, like, please enjoy this first high as much as you can, because like the time after is the worst time. It's funny because I have this so conscious in my mind. It was around like 2.5 years ago. We were going like this, right? We had our first like 100K month. And then like, bro, like the ego inflation we experienced because it was happening so quick. I think we went from like 20, 30K a month to like 100K a month over the course of like 3 to 4 months. We experienced a crazy scale. And it inflated our egos. We went to Dubai, we went to Miami, we were just living like ballers, bro. I'm talking ballers. Like every single table, you would like get everything, you would invite everyone. And then within like 2 months, like we almost like didn't work, and then like the business was crumbling. And over the time span of like 3 months, we went to like the biggest high to like the biggest low, because the business was always almost failing, right? Because we stopped doing all of the stuff that brought us there. We got such a high payroll, right? Because if you want to do 100K, you also have to have a certain payroll of people who work for that. And then like your costs are rising, but then the clients are churning, and it always almost ended our business. So it was like crazy high, crazy low, and then slowly like building it back up.
it's funny because, dude, we all have the same story. Like every single person like that I think that we know all have, from wherever they are in the world, everyone has the same story.
Yeah.
And I always say that it's about what you do in the moments of darkness that makes you who you are. And like, bro, like I remember like last year, like when I was living, when I was living in Dubai with my ex-girlfriend now, who you met when we went to dinner. Like I was like losing my fucking hair. Like before that, like that year before this year, like I was like losing my hair. Like I was so stressed out because there were so many things going on. And it's like you ride this insane fucking wave. Like you're 24, 25, 26 years old, and you are by all means a winner. The world is telling you you're a winner. People on social media are telling you you're a winner. You have fucking money. You have everything that you've ever wanted. And you feel like you're King Midas, right? You feel like you can't fail. You feel like everything you touch is going to turn to gold. And it's the story of how Icarus flew too close to the sun. And as soon as those wings start melting and you come back down, you gotta get your shit and get back up again. Because like, and I think it's a rite of passage for every single entrepreneur, but I think it makes you a better businessman and a better operator. And it really allows you to focus on the things that are important. A lot of guys like, and I have no problem with the guys, and I respect it with the guys who have, and the girls, on the off chance that a girl watches this, but on the off chance, like, okay, like we want to get to 10, 20K a month to go Thailand or live, live this life. And, that's a great way to live if you want to live like that. But I think you and I, because we're very similar, obviously, but it's not in my DNA to not do everything that I possibly can to succeed in like everything that I do. And I think that every single person that we know has this story, but what do you think? My question is, what do you think separates you versus all of the other people that are have been in business in the same time as you, but have achieved, a 10th or a 20th of the results?
Really good question. I think, and I had this conversation a lot with my business partner Lars, like over the years, like even like in the first year of business, second year of business, because it always felt fairly quick, like how we move forward, how we grew the business, it always felt quick to us. And that's also like the feedback we got from the outset that it was fairly quick. I think we did a really good job at like keeping both our egos outside of discussions and the equation, like looking at business and making strategic business decisions.
Yep.
And we also had like we have like really tough direct communication, right? And it's like we do a really good job at reflecting really quickly and just running through trial and error again and again and again and again and again, never.
Are we good?
It's
Yeah.
um I'm a big fan of the book Relentless, right?
Mhm.
It's like and there's also the saying, I think it's what is it? Something around the lines of like it's really about like how many times you can stand up again, right?
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurship, it's like you're getting punched in the face like 1,001 times before you succeed. And I feel like people just give up, to be honest. I feel
Yeah.
like people just give up. People cannot endure the pain. People cannot endure the struggles, the problems. And people also don't try enough because they're like afraid to fail. And we literally just like try to excel, try to succeed every single day with like everything that we did. And it's when we found something that worked, we did more of it. And sometimes we iterated, found a new thing that worked, did more of it. We always had like really solid mentors. And to this day, every other week, every other month, I pay someone that's further ahead of me in some area of business or life to teach me, right? Like mentors in like special areas of business. Whether that's personal development, fitness, lifestyle, whether that's managing employees, whether that's whatever,
Yeah.
running ads, doing copywriting. Our like we've put so much money into educating ourselves around like every single topic there is. Whenever we found that something isn't working the way we wanted to, or we felt that we could do something better, we just found the best person, went to them and told them, give me an hour of your time, I will give you 1,000, 2,000, however much you want, and just like tell us everything you know, right? Like we probably spent like somewhere of 250,000 to 500,000 on like education, masterminds, events, consultings over like the past couple of years because we are so obsessed with like learning, right? And it's like me right now, I feel like I don't know anything about ads and marketing, right? It's really interesting. Like every other day, I learn something new, and I'm like, fuck, how much do I know about like scripting ads and running ads and media buying and all of that stuff because I'm doing lead gen for like my own service now. And it's yeah. And then I search for a person who knows all of this stuff, right? And just like have them teach me. And it's I feel like really this eager and this like hunger to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And never let your ego become too big. Like it's always day one, always be a student of the game. That's I feel like those are a lot of like the mindsets we had and like the mental frameworks around like the business, and which probably led to the growth we have experienced over the past couple of years.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. I kind of now in my old age have adjusted for a lot of the mistakes that I made in the past. I was I didn't realize how big I was back in the day and how big the business was back in the day. Now, like you got these guys raw dogging traffic on Instagram Reels, and they get to 100K a month, like recurring revenue subscription community with like not even like it's insane with like a really shitty funnel and everything. And I didn't know jack shit about marketing. Like I didn't know fucking anything, bro. I didn't know anything, and I was running this business, and it was so cash flow heavy, and it was just a great product. And I feel like now the reason, like my kind of thing now is like a lot of people are telling me, oh, like David, you're next up, right? And they don't really, I don't think they understand that, not everyone obviously, but I think that, a lot of people don't understand that like I've already kind of been there, done that in a lot of things. And even though I seem new on YouTube specifically, like I've been in the game, like you and I have both been in the game a while, right? And I've now corrected for the majority of the mistakes that I've made, specifically during the first three, because this is my third year of entrepreneurship now. September is this is my kind of anniversary, right? 3 years. And so I've adjusted for all of the mistakes that I've made. And one of the biggest things that I learned is because not only I learned this is a very hard financial lesson because I left about 10 to 20 million dollars on the table. If I accounted for ascension, I didn't have an ascension model with my old business.
Mm.
And I didn't account for anything like masterminds or upsells or anything like that. And so I looked at it and I was like, damn. And now we've adjusted for that. So I know exactly what I need to do in terms of action steps in order to get back to, obviously, like, actually not get back to, because we've already blown past it where like the peak of the revenue used to be for the old business. But get to the point where I can be like, okay, shit, well, I have a 8-figure opportunity here. It's time to leverage it and take advantage of it and do the best that we possibly can. And so I think the entire game is a series of adjustments. And I think that you, like you said, what I really resonated with was you have to constantly be educating yourself, because now I'm in my mind, I feel like I don't know anything. Even though it's like you can sit here and look like, oh, well, these guys, they've done all this stuff. It's like the bigger you get, the more you don't know. And it's very important to continue learning. Like I'm still like, I actually on my separate screen on my laptop that you can't see here on camera, like I was reading a book last night and people like, you don't know everything, especially if you're at the point where you're only making like a few 5 figures a month. And it's really important to continue to iterate on the process and just make sure that you're evolving as an entrepreneur and doing everything you can to grow the business. And I think where you've stood out, and I think where I've stood out as well, is just a commitment to excellence. But I think what you did better than me is you probably focused a lot more. I was in a different country every other month, and I was going here and going there, and especially during the first few years. So obviously now you have to learn and you have to adjust, right?
Bro, it's a lesson that I just made this year. It's literally until like New Year's, I was doing this shit. I was traveling another country like once a month, twice a month. And over New Year's, I was like, okay, this is nice. This is a nice lifestyle, but I'm not building up momentum. And that's like what I said to you in the before we started recording. I was just like beginning of this year, I said I will only do the travels that I have to do, like the best masterminds, the best speaking opportunities I will take. To everything else, I will say no. And this has been like the best, most growth business year we ever had, just because I was so locked in behind my computer. And it's again this Alex Becker model, right? It's like cut down all of the dopamine, like the fake dopamine of like traveling, nice food, Instagram reels, whatever there is, and take the dopamine from the hard stuff, from the work or from going to the gym, from just going doing a walk and not having any distractions. Like it's so crazy. Like if you cut out all of the dopamine, your work is going to give you the dopamine. Like building stuff is going to give you the dopamine, and it's so crazy. It's like I have cut out everything, and I'm the most happy ever. I'm not traveling that much. I'm just at home. I do the same shit every single day, down to the minute. I go to the same lunch place every single day. I do the exact same work every single day. I go to bed same time, and I feel the best ever.
Yeah.
It's but yes, it has been like a really powerful lesson to learn too. Like you gotta lock in, especially like what you said. Like if you want to reach excellence, you gotta lock in. Like you have to like the amount of focus, the amount of like energy and productivity it takes to like reach excellence and build this business to like multiple seven figures or maybe even eight figures one day. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
And I was saying this to my co-founder like last year already. Like if we want to hit eight figures over like the next 2-3 years, we have to change a lot, right? We have to change a lot. And it's a really interesting journey. Like I try to remind myself as much as possible that entrepreneurship is a gift and it's like such a beautiful journey with like all the ups and downs, and it's the best thing ever. And I think if you're taking it and if you're enjoying it and if you're conscious about it, it's the best thing that can happen to you as a man.
Yeah, I agree. My last question for you, my friend, is how important is being on your purpose and being on, first off, what is your purpose? What do you feel is your purpose? What do you feel is your mission? And how important is being on that purpose and on that mission to what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve?
Really great question. I personally believe for me, it was always my biggest vision and mission to become the best I can, like become the best version of myself. And this goes back to like almost a decade ago when I started obsessing with psychology just because I was like, I didn't fit in and all of that stuff like that I talked about earlier. And I just sat down and I was like, bro, I gotta work on myself. And I got so obsessed with working on myself and like reaping the rewards of like building a certain character. Um, and that's just it's like in my DNA right now. Like standing still, like a shark standing still, you die, right? Like there's never going to be a point where you just like can stand or just can maintain. Like for me in my mind, that's like I'm dying. I'm
Yeah.
dying. I have to progress somewhere, and that's what I really feel like my mission is for like myself and like secondary. I think like the ripple effect is the effect that at least for me, I can have on my environment. You know what I mean? It's back then I didn't really have, I had to search for mentors and people to look up to because I didn't have that in my environment. And over the years, I felt like I need to become successful so that one day I can be the person that someone else looks up to. And it's not like, so that's like really my vision or like my mission or what you want to call it, or like the purpose that I have is like I want to become the best version of myself. I want to become super successful so that I can have a really positive impact on my environment and also be an aspirational person for like a lot of people to look up to and like being able to like mentor them or like give something back. That's like the most I can break it down to the core.
I love that. I have one more question. What do you think is going to be the biggest driving factor in you guys getting from multiple seven figures to eight figures?
Um, Really great question. I think it's just this obsession with data right now. It's for us to like right now we would about have to double the business to like hit eight figures. So it's just like looking at, okay, what do we have to do in terms of client acquisition? What do we have to do in terms of team? What do we have to do in terms of client retention? Um, like how much do we have to improve or increase all of those KPIs and
Yeah.
then just act on that, right? It's like at a certain point, it becomes really like you can almost calculate or like reverse engineer a certain goal. Like I have to have a certain ad spend that's going to get me so much demos, so many new clients. They're going to stay on for so long, get me such a customer lifetime value with that profit. And then I just have to do more of that basically. So yeah, that's what I feel right now, at least at this stage or like the next growth stage we're at, before we really have to change something drastically. Like right now, I really feel like it's doing more of what it's working for us currently. Um, And then probably the growth stage after that, if we then want to grow it further, then we have to introduce more, probably go broad and all of that stuff. But right now, I really feel like it's doing more of what works.
I think, well, I think accelerated as a business, just from, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because you and your co-founder are such important pieces of business, it you might have a tough time selling the business.
Definitely.
Like, because here's the thing, because like if you have and this is something I was experimenting with a couple guys that like I mentor and stuff, was, you know, taking some of the future value of the contracts that they have, and what's up with the camera, taking a few of the contracts that they have in terms of future value and predictive cash flows, and actually offloading that to another agency, because like their stuff is easier to replicate and easier to get results for. But you guys are such keystones in the business and pieces of the business that I feel like if you guys were to go for like some sort of exit multiple or exit valuation, it'd be very hard unless you guys were to continue to work in the business. But I don't know, those are just my thoughts, because like, you know, you always want to, like, for me, right, like with when I was running Cash Flow Syndicate, I couldn't sell that. There was
Yeah.
no, there was a 0 exit multiple on there. I couldn't even sell cash flows. So, you know, it's interesting the way that the founder-based businesses work versus, what's the word I'm looking for? Business-based businesses.
I
Like,
mean, it's like the business model that we're in right now, right? It's so much tied to like the personal brand of us running the business,
yeah,
because of like the name we build and how we attract clients.
yeah.
Um, I think one day, I mean, I haven't been there, but that's what I've seen from Hormozy. Like that's what he did with Gym Launch, basically. It's going to be like a long progression where you really slowly introduce like 1 or 2 new key figures and key personal brands to the business and really slowly take your face off of everything. And that's how he was able to sell Gym Launch, because he introduced, I think it was his name, Caleb or something, and like his wife into the business as like 2 new faces. And then over like 1 to 2 years, he really slowly increased their ad spend and their share that they got in the content and reduced his. And then he was able to like detach himself from the business. But it's like to be able to sell the agency, that's going to be a long process of doing exactly that. Right. Like being able to attract new clients without my face, it's that's going to be a tough one.
yeah. It's crazy because Alex Hormozy is a savage, because he was able to get an exit on an info company. Like, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
It's unheard of, but it also is a testament to building replicable systems and processes, which is kind of what I'm doing now with everything. Because with, you know, I restructured my stuff to make sure that if I was to eventually leave the business, maybe one day, that because it's so fundamentals and principles based, it still works. And I think that's what Sam Ovens did as well, because Rian bought consulting.com.
Yeah.
And so making sure that the product is still paramount and the systems and the fundamentals are still there within the business, I think is the most important part. I think around the, you know, I think a good lesson is like around the 50 to 100K a month mark, to really build out stuff that, like, so it can honestly start to work without you. And then really starting to bring in some sort of head of acquisitions or some head of sales to start to manage the client relationships and pay them very well, or some sales manager or something to come in and be able to train the team and kind of run the operations in the day-to-day faster sooner than later.
No.
Because you never want to be in a position like where you build this heavy cash flow business like I was in, right? You build this heavy cash flow business with 0 enterprise value. Probably like negative enterprise value. And so like now I'm very much focused on some of the other stuff I'll show you, but you
Yeah.
know, I'm focused on all of the stuff that we're doing now eventually hopefully being able to sell it for like, even if it's like a 1.5x multiple, or it's like 14 to 16 months of cash flow, then it's like worth it.
Yeah.
Because I would rather do that and put my time and energy where it's like, okay, you can make the cash flow from this business. Sure, it might run at lower margins, but you're going to have a higher multiple on the end if you go to sell it, because otherwise it's kind of just not worth it. Like you can only make so much money with a cash flow business, you know. Every guy that, you know, every guy that I know, especially in Dubai, who is hyper successful, has had some sort of exit. And they've, you know, built some company, they've sold it for 10 million. It's like they go from like negative to 8 figures in like a few years, and they just
Yeah.
somebody to buy it. So, and I really look up to the venture capital, the private equity, not the venture capital, the private equity guys who are they're able to manage and run like 85 businesses at one time.
Mm.
You know, like how do they do that?
No idea. Maybe
That's
Luca knows.
that's the only thing that I want. That's one of the only things that I want to learn how to do is how to be an operator and a manager at that level. Like that, like you're saying, you know, in terms of like learning advertising and everything like that. I would love to meet someone or have somebody hit me up who knows how to do that, who is at like the 30 to $100 million plus level, and just learn that directly from them. I think that would be awesome. Because that's kind of about like, those are kind of the guys that we have to look up to now.
Yeah.
Or learn from.
That'll be the next step.
Yeah, exactly. Carl, my brother, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, man. It was at some point I was so lost in the conversation that I forgot about the time and everything.
Yeah, man. Dude, it's a pleasure, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Do you have anything else that you want to say to the audience?
Not really. I hope you enjoyed it. Keep watching David's stuff. He's real, and it's going to be one of the most valuable things you're going to see.
Appreciate that, bro. Well, guys, thank you for watching, and I'm gonna try to make this like a series where I just kind of like sit and talk to my friends. But Carl, where can we find you? I'll link your stuff in the description. And by the way, like I'm not gonna name drop the clients that you have over in here, but I might do an intro and be like, yeah, he works with these guys and these guys and these guys, just for the hook, so people stay and watch. So
Yeah,
dude, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time, and I'll
for
talk to you.
sure. For sure, bro.